Hey, I'm Tiara J from Gifted Sweet Hair Studio in Clifton, New Jersey, and today I'll be doing a lace frontal tutorial with hair provided by Ultimate Hair World. Stay tuned.
So the key to any lace sewing is the foundation. So it's very important to have a strong foundation, and the braid pattern is everything. So I like to braid the braids a little smaller so that the frontal lays nicely and the sewing is very natural. The braid pattern that I prefer is to do the slanted braids on each side of the head, which you'll see later on will act as an anchor for when we sew down the frontal. So this is the braid pattern I like and I prefer. So we're gonna, after we braid the hair, we're gonna stitch the braids together, make them nice and secure, and we'll get ready to put on the frontal. This frontal is already pre-customized. It's pre-plucked and it's pre-bleached. We bleach the knots to give it a more natural look. So what you're going to have the client do is hold each side of the frontal very tightly, and then we're going to cut any excess off of the frontal. We want to make sure it's fitting the client's head perfectly, and when we trim the excess, we want to trim it in a C shape so that around the ear, so that it fits nicely. So once the frontal is trimmed, we're going to start the stitching from the sideburns to behind the ear, still having the client holding the frontal so that it doesn't shift. We're going to start the stitching behind the ear, and then a little trick that I do to make sure that the frontal is laid is once I get to behind the ear, I take the thread and I bring it around along the nape to the other side of the head, and then I start to stitch from behind the ear to the sideburns on the other side. But then you want to pull it kind of tightly so that the frontal is laying, and it just helps the frontal lay really nicely and gives it a really natural look. So we stitched from ear, each side of the ear. Now we're going to come to the back of the frontal, and we want this frontal to be laid. So what I prefer to do is to start at the top of the frontal and start my stitching from side to side, and that prevents any buckling. You know, we don't want to see any buckling in our frontal. We want it to be laid, so I prefer this method for the back of the frontal. After we stitch the back, now we're going to go to each side and go back to that slanted braid, and we're going to make a stitch along that braid to ensure that this frontal isn't going anywhere. It's going to have it nice and natural, and it's going to keep the frontal in place. So we're going to do that on each side of the head. We're going to stitch along that anchor braid and make sure that we're stitching in places that we do not want to be parted in. So make sure you tell the client, do not part her hair in those areas where we are stitching onto the anchor braid. Now her frontal is secure, it's stitched down, it's not going anywhere. We can get into these bundles. So I start to stitch in a U shape along the nape, and I'm bringing the tracks pretty close together because I want this sewing to be very nice and full. And I'm also using a fold over method to prevent any shedding by cutting the wefts a little too much, and it's not really necessary. So we're gonna do the fold over method until we get to the crown of the head. Once we get to the crown of the head, I'm gonna change my placement to an upside down U or upside down C, and I'm going to use that placement all the way to the base of the frontal, making sure that we're still stitching the wefts pretty close together, and that's going to help to prevent any spacing once we get to the front of the frontal. Also note, I am using a lock stitch method, which is going to ensure that those tracks will not go anywhere. She can go swimming, she can go to the gym, she could do an upside down handstand. Those tracks aren't going anywhere because we're locking them and stitching them and making sure they're really tight and secure. So we're stitching and once we get to the base of the frontal, we want to make sure that the tracks are as close as possible to the base because we don't want any spaces. We want the hair to blend perfectly. We want it to flow naturally. So we want to really make sure that once we get to the top near the base of the frontal, that the wefts are laying very closely to the base of the frontal. Now she is all stitched up and ready to go. By the way, I'm loving this hair, y'all. It's so full and so beautiful. And note that this is only 3 bundles and the fullness is unbelievable. It's beautiful. Now we're going to trim the lace. So I prefer to go from the middle of the forehead and work my way to ear. And note that you can leave a little extra lace to give you some wiggle room. And then once all the lace is cut, then you can go back and clean it up. We want to make sure that it looks nice and natural. So now once the lace is cut, she's looking great. She's looking natural. You don't know where her hairline starts, where the lace begins. She's set. Now we're going to get into these baby hairs. I personally love them, but you can customize them to your preference. And I usually cut the baby hairs with a razor to give them a nice natural wispy look. You never want the baby hairs too heavy because it starts to look, not authentic, and we want her to look as natural as possible. So now that the baby hairs are cut, I molded the front of the lace with the Got to Be Glued, which I love. And then I'm going to mold the baby hairs with foam mousse, and then I'm going to set her under the dryer to set for about 15 minutes. Okay, so she is set and ready to go. And as you can see, this frontal is not going anywhere. It is looking like it's growing out of her head, y'all. This is natural and it's beautiful. And I'm going to style it first in the wavy texture. I love the hair in its natural texture. And then we're going to switch it up and blow it out and do some nice soft curls for you and give her some nice body. So there you have it, y'all. She has these beautiful soft waves. She is ready for the night on the town. She looks great. The frontal is great. It's laid. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching.